I'm Coco Wheeler. I am a senior program officer at the True Colors Fund. I'm a social worker, and I want to talk with you about the future of healing, which I am regurgitating from an article that I read. So this is not my content exactly. This is an article that was written by Sean Ginwright. I hope I said that right. It was a really cool article about healing-centered engagement. So first and foremost, we want to think about trauma-informed care to kick us off. So trauma-informed care is essentially understanding and recognizing and responding to the effects of all types of trauma. So I feel like the hard part in trauma-informed care is often the recognizing. It's the recognizing that everybody has trauma of some sort. The rest of it, can sometimes come more naturally. And if we have like 4 main tenets of trauma-informed approaches, they are as follows. You realize there's a widespread impact of trauma. You are recognizing signs and symptoms of trauma. You are responding by fully integrating knowledge and trauma into policies, procedures, and practices. And ideally, you're trying to not induce re-traumatization of yourself or others. Cool. So if we boil that down even further, I want to think about trauma-informed care in these 3 areas. It's the individual, so it's the person that is experiencing the trauma. It's the internal, it is the way that the trauma is manifesting in those persons' interactions, emotions, etc. And then it's the pathology, it's the treatment of the trauma moving forward. And that's all well and good, and that has worked for many years, but we want to move into the future, don't we? I mean, please. So we want to move from the individual to the collective, because we know that trauma does not just happen to individuals, it can happen to entire communities, right? So if we're talking about folks that, for instance, experienced living through a natural disaster, like Hurricane Katrina, they experienced a collective trauma. And so if we're not healing an entire community or an entire ethnicity, nationality, identity, then we're not getting to the environmental nature of trauma, which is really about pulling it up from the roots. So if we want to continue down the pathway of thinking about a natural disaster. So if we're thinking about Hurricane Katrina, it wasn't just that a hurricane happened. It was the environment in which a hurricane happened with the policies and procedures that followed. So we had a horrible response from the government. We had purposeful regentrification of areas that were already gentrifying, and so that became an environmental trauma on top of the already existing trauma of living through a natural disaster. So with healing-centered engagement, we want to move past the pathology, that is the treatment of the trauma, and we want to look towards the possibility. Wow, can you imagine? So people are not just the trauma that they experience, but your trauma shapes you. Right? And so many times, trauma becomes a strength and something that we should honor and look to as being a part of who you are. So some of the basic ideas of healing-centered engagement are as follows. So healing-centered engagement is culturally grounded. So trauma is rude, does not have any manners, and so it often takes from you. But with healing-centered engagement, what we're doing is we're trying to reconnect with our identity. And we do that through spending time with people who have lived experiences, who are a part of your same community, and finding strength in that. There's strength in difference, but there's a lot of strength in sameness also, in being able to connect with one another on shared experience. Healing-centered engagement is also focused on well-being. It is moving forward past that pathology that we were talking about, and it's not focusing on the symptoms and what you've lived through and experienced. It's focusing on your future and what is possible for you and how you can take what you've experienced and lived through and apply it and use that as possibility. Is focused on adult providers, because trauma is not something that has an age limit, right? And so for all the adult providers in the room, if no one has already said this, you have permission to heal as well and not just be the folks that are processing other people's trauma. Cool. I did it. Thank you.